You ever have one of those days where something as simple as a busted garden hose sets off a chain reaction that makes you question everything you thought you knew about people? Because I sure did, and let me tell you, it all started with me, the chief of police, just trying to get to work without soaking my whole basement. You'd think after 8 years running this department and more than 2 decades in uniform, I'd be ready for anything, but nothing preps you for a neighbor like Linda Forrester. So picture this sun barely up. I'm out on my lawn in Maywood Ridge, coffee in hand, already thinking about the mountain of paperwork waiting for me when I spot a nice little pond forming right by my azaleas. Turns out my old garden hose finally gave up spraying water everywhere. I head down to the basement, shut off the main valve, and figure, hey, I'll deal with it after work, right? But just as I'm locking the door, my phone buzzes, last-minute change to a budget meeting, and suddenly there's a hurricane on my lawn wearing nothing but a polka dot towel and a head full of shampoo. It's Linda, my neighbor from across the way, charging at me like I'd set her house on fire. You can't make this up. She's red-faced, screeching, "What do you think you're doing? You turned off my water in the middle of my shower." I try to explain calm as I can because this isn't my first rodeo, that there's a leak and I had to shut off my water, not hers. But she's not hearing a word. Instead, she calls me a fake cop, says I'm playing dress-up to scare people like her, never mind the actual badge and uniform. Then out of nowhere, she says her plumber temporarily hooked her water line to mine because the city hasn't fixed her main yet. That's when it hits me she's been stealing my water, and not by accident either. Let me back up a sec, because that's the kind of twist that makes you forget you're late for anything. So there we are, me, standing in shock, and Linda just ramps it up. She spits on my cheek, tries to claw my face with those manicured nails, all the while yelling that she's calling the real police on me for turning off her water. 23 years in law enforcement, and believe me, I've seen it all, but nothing like this. I do my best to keep my cool call and dispatch myself, make sure there's a record, because I know how this looks and I know how fast things can spin out of control, especially when race and authority get thrown into the mix. Now here's where things get real wild. I'm halfway to the station trying to process what just happened when my dispatcher radios in, barely holding back laughter. "Chief, we just got a 911 call about a black man impersonating an officer at your address." Yeah, that happened. I whip the car around, head back home, and there's Linda now fully dressed. Thank God, waving at the arriving officers, shouting that she wants me arrested. My guys, Rodriguez and Lee, know me, but they play it straight. Ask her for proof, and when she can't provide any, they gently break it to her that she's talking to the actual chief of police. Linda still doesn't back down. She insists. The plumber handled everything, but when she brings out a business card, it's not even a licensed plumber, just some local handyman named Mike Donnelly. And wouldn't you know it, Mike rolls up at that very moment, sees the uniforms, and you can practically smell his regret. After a little coaxing, he admits Linda paid him under the table to run a line from my property to hers. Says she told him the new guy wouldn't mind. Yeah, I minded. By this point, the scene has drawn a small crowd, neighbors peeking through curtains, a city utility truck pulling up, my buddy Frank stepping out with his crew. Frank checks the connection, shakes his head, and says it's one of the worst hack jobs he's seen, totally illegal, potentially hazardous, and liable to contaminate both our water. Linda's story starts changing fast. Suddenly, she's a victim on a fixed income, city fees too high, just trying to get by. I can't help but notice her designer yoga pants, luxury SUV, but hey, maybe fixed income means something different in her world. Rodriguez gives Linda a citation for water theft, and for filing a false police report, tells Mike he'll have to answer for his side hustle but notes his cooperation. And just when I think it's over, I get a cease and desist from Linda's lawyer that evening, accusing me of harassment and tampering with utilities like I'm the villain here. My wife Vanessa reads it and shakes her head, pours me a glass of wine and says, "This is going to be one for the books, isn't it?" Next day, Linda's packing a moving truck. She doesn't apologize, just throws me a check, signs a statement, and disappears. You'd think that would be the end, right? Wrong. A week later, I get a call from the Ridgebrook police chief. Guess who just moved in and is already accusing security of racial profiling? I send over the paperwork, tell him to keep everything on file, and wish him luck. But here's the twist. Linda's drama spills onto the internet. She posts a whole story online painting herself as the victim of small-town racism and police abuse, with blurry photos and a flood of angry comments. For a hot second, it feels like my reputation is on trial, but I don't run or hide. I release the body cam footage, utility records, even the statement she signed. Neighbors back me up, and within days, the tide turns. The story becomes about responsible policing and standing up to false accusations. The real kicker, Linda tries to join the HOA board in her new neighborhood, promising to restore order. But her ex-husband shows up at a community conference and tells me Linda's been running the same playbook for years. Always the victim, always the center of chaos. When she tries to grandstand at the HOA, someone digs up her history, including her signed confession from my case, and she loses spectacularly. Even her lawyer drops her after she starts blaming him for her failures. Now, it's not that I think people like Linda ever really change. Some folks would rather burn a bridge than walk across it, you know. But here's the lesson in a community truth matters. Sometimes it takes a mess to remind everyone what honesty and decency look like. That's what I held on to, even when it felt like the whole world was watching. And, you know, as I sit on my porch, coffee in hand, watching new neighbors laugh and play, I realize sometimes the best justice is just living well, letting your actions speak and not letting bitterness settle in. But I'm curious, if you were in my shoes, would you have handled it differently? Was I too forgiving, or is there value in letting the truth speak for itself? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about what justice really means and how communities deal with conflict. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this story, don't forget to share it.